All right, welcome everyone to this exciting and just amazing lecture we're gonna get here today by Dunna Did It. If you guys don't know who he is yet, you have to check out his YouTube. I'm sure he's gonna get into details on how you can find him, but he's not only an inspiring YouTuber, he's a great music producer, a recording engineer, and he drops a new video every Monday, just letting you know what's going on with his life. I'm so happy to have him here today. I can't wait to have him share some of his insights with you on how to make YouTube work. So without any further ado, let's just get right into it. Welcome, Dunna Did It. Welcome to Sony of Canada Profusion 2021. Dunna, I'm so glad to have you here. On to you, man. Let's take it away.
Thanks for having me. It's definitely my pleasure, and to everyone who's out there watching, I'm just gonna hop right into it. So, as you may have seen in the title, my real name is Justin, but pretty much everyone online and offline calls me Dunna. I have a YouTube channel called Dunna Did It, where I primarily talk about photography, videography, online content creation, and those kinds of things. And over the past nearly 5 years, I built up a channel to having over 150,000 subscribers. And in 2021, I made it into my full-time job. And my goal today is to kind of give you some insight into what that process looked like, maybe some of the gear that I used along the way, and some tips on what you should and shouldn't do in your own YouTube journey if that's something that you're trying to do. I'm going to move pretty quickly because there's a lot to talk about, but we'll also have a question period at the end. So make sure to drop your questions wherever it seems like it makes sense to drop questions there, and we'll kind of collect those, and we'll definitely have some Q&A at the end there. So let's kick things off with a bit of real life. Before I went full-time with YouTube, like most people, I had another job. It was a pretty cool job, but it was still a job nonetheless. I've been a professional recording engineer, music producer, and musician for most of my adult life. I'm part owner of a recording studio here in Edmonton, and I have made a lot of music, including some that was nominated for a Juno a few years ago, which was such an honor. Sometime in late 2016, I decided that I needed a new hobby that could just be for me rather than all the music work that I had been doing for my music clients. And I picked up a Sony a6000 camera so that I could start doing photography and hopefully start a YouTube channel. I wanted to be a vlogger, basically, to make cool videos of whatever I happen to be doing at the time. And like a lot of people at the time, I was super into Casey Neistat, and I decided I could do that too if I really wanted to. So as things went on, I got more and more into the technical side of making videos, the gear, the editing techniques, the lighting, the color grading. Audio already came pretty easy to me, but that was even a bit different from the music that I was used to working on. And as I became more and more obsessed with the technical things, I started talking about them more and more in my videos until my channel gradually shifted from being a vlogging channel into primarily being gear reviews, tips and tricks, tutorials about photography and videography. And that's pretty much the Dunna Did It channel as it is today. And as I've shifted into that full-time position and my music into a more backseat part-time position, I'm spending obviously a lot more time doing YouTube. So that's me in a nutshell. I like to talk about camera stuff. That's the elevator pitch. But let's talk about the wonderful world of YouTube, starting a YouTube channel, and some things that you might want to think about if you want to start one or if you want to improve what you already have. Online video seems to be getting basically more and more popular every single day, and YouTube is one of the best ways that you can share your creativity with the world. There are a ton of different forms of online video. We've got vlogging, tutorials, travel videos, reviews, unboxing videos, ASMR, video essays, reactions, and more and more and more. So one of the most important things that you can do when you're first trying to start a YouTube channel is decide what you want your channel to be. Now, most likely you've already got some kind of an idea by the time that you want to make a channel, but if you're anything like me, that's probably only about a quarter of the way thought out, kind of a half-baked idea, and some of the details could use some finessing. So one of the things that you can do to try and give your content a more obvious direction is to figure out who you want to be making the videos for. Who is your target audience? For me, and for probably 80% of people who want to start a YouTube channel, their target audience is themselves. And honestly, I think that's a great way to go for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you make videos with yourself as your target audience, aka make videos that you would want to watch, you'll probably enjoy the process of making those videos too. And we'll get back to why that's important in a second. And secondly, the chances are that if you enjoy the videos that you're making, there's someone else out there who will also enjoy them. So you're not guessing that an audience exists for your videos. You know that there's at least one person on this earth who would want to see the content that you're making, and most likely there will also be more. And as much as we're all unique in some ways, it's also pretty easy to find people with similar interests and tastes if we just look around a bit. Knowing who you're making your videos for and writing it down if you're a more organized person than I am gives you a direction for the type of content that you might want to make. Does your target audience prefer funny videos? Do they want things straight to the point? Are they there to be educated or maybe entertained or maybe a bit of a combination of both? And as I mentioned before, making videos that you like and you care about and enjoy making is important too, because this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. The longer you can stick with it, the more likely you are to grow. Now, one thing that I do want to mention here is that you don't have to have it all figured out at the start, and I know that that's something that stops a lot of people from starting in the first place. As I mentioned, I pivoted my channel from being more of a vlogging channel to being more educational, and that worked just fine for me. In fact, that was partially what helped my channel grow, as I really found what I should be doing. Especially when you're first starting out, you've got lots of room to experiment because there just aren't that many eyes on your work. I know that can be discouraging, but try and see that as an upside. This is where you can be flexible and you can play around a bit. Once you've built up a bigger audience, it can be more difficult to pivot, but you do still have the option to do that even. If you've been personable, and authentic, then your diehard audience will likely pivot with you and still care about what you have to share. Now, it's one thing to say, figure out your target audience, but another super important thing is to do some research and figure out what you think works and what doesn't in a video on YouTube. And this is the fun part, really. Go watch a bunch of YouTube. That's pretty much your assignment here. But instead of watching it like you normally would, kind of in a passive way, put on your analytical hat and watch it to see what you like and what you don't like about those videos. And this is going to be what you're going to use to make your own videos. Which part of the YouTube videos kept your attention the best, and which parts made you want to click away and do something else? Which videos seem to be drawing an audience and which ones don't? And when we're learning pretty much anything in this world, one of the parts of that process is to analyze the people that have done it before us. For painters, they learn techniques from the greats. For writers, they read and read and read. For musicians, they learn how to play other people's songs and borrow all the techniques and styles that they can when they start making their own. So for making online videos, studying what other people are doing and what's working is exactly the same, or at least it should be. It's important to note that you don't want to be directly copying anyone with your own content, but learning and borrowing little bits and pieces here and there is exactly how every great artist developed their own unique style. Now, what about making YouTube into a job? How do we take uploading YouTube videos online and start making money doing it? 2 words: patience and persistence. If you don't have patience and persistence, this likely isn't going to work out for you in a serious way. Very few people get lucky with that one genius idea that skyrockets them to the top, and even those people often don't have anything to follow it up to keep them there. But if you're hoping to turn this into a business, then think of it like a business. When you start a business, you have to invest. Generally, that's money, but also time in getting it started. You need the space, you often need supplies or the products that you're going to sell, and then you need to advertise to get people there. With YouTube, I like to think of your first bunch of videos as an investment. And I'm not talking about 5, 10, 15 videos. I'm talking about like 100 or more videos in some cases. You really need to be willing to make a lot of content with very few views before your channel might start to take off. But remember this, ideally, those videos are up there forever. People can keep finding them and therefore finding you and your channel for years to come. Those videos never stop working for you. Not to mention, your early videos can be monetized and you can make more money as more and more people start to find your channel later on and find those older videos. Some of my most popular videos on a month-to-month basis, if I look at like my views in the last 28 days, are videos that I made 2 years ago. They still get consistent views and therefore make me money from YouTube advertising. And with the more content that you have out on the internet for people and the more content that you have out on the internet for people to accidentally stumble upon, the more likely you are to start gaining an audience. So again, persistence and patience, but also there are some things to keep in mind about YouTube specifically and how it works that you can kind of take advantage of. First of all, YouTube is a search engine. A ton of people go there to search for answers to their questions. So the easiest way to get your videos discovered is to answer the questions that people might have and just try to make your video more concise or more entertaining or more educational than the other videos on the same topic. For me, that looks like making videos about certain pieces of camera gear that I know people will be searching for, or teaching techniques that people might want to know how to do. But that doesn't necessarily make sense for some types of content that are more purely entertainment or lifestyle based. If you want to make videos about if I want to make the videos about the day-to-day adventures that I go on with my wife, let's say we're going to IKEA to buy some furniture, it's a bit more difficult to make that relevant to what people are searching. But that doesn't mean that those kinds of videos don't work. In my experience, it just means that you need to have more patience and persistence for your videos to be found. In my mind, I always divide YouTube into 2 different categories of videos. There are search-based videos and there are browse-based videos. Search-based videos is the stuff that answers people's questions, and browse-based is the more purely entertaining stuff that people have to kind of stumble upon either in the YouTube browse features or hear about it from someone else that they know and specifically go looking for it. One of the most important ways to get your videos found for both types of videos is to have great thumbnails and titles. And if you've done any searching into how to start a YouTube channel, this has probably come up. And this is because regardless of how you manage to get your YouTube video in front of people's faces, and YouTube just shows them, you still have to get them to decide to click on that video, because clicks equal views. Have you ever noticed how Netflix sometimes, when you're on Netflix, sometimes you'll see a movie with the official movie poster displayed, but then the next time you log in, it'll show that same movie with other images or still frames from the movie itself. Maybe it's just like one character looking like they're in trouble or something like that, or maybe it's an actor who also has another big film at the time who happens to be in that movie also. This is because Netflix knows and understands the power of those thumbnails for getting people to click, getting people to decide to watch that movie. And there's a ton of information about great thumbnails and titles if you do a bit of searching, but I'll give you a couple of tips that I've found work for me. First of all, don't lie or mislead people who are making the decision to click or not click. It doesn't work. We've all heard the term clickbait before, and this is exactly it. If they click on your video and it's not what they were expecting, they will click away from that video. They'll go do something else or find another video, and YouTube will assume that that means your video is a bad video, and because people don't want to watch it, and YouTube will stop showing it to other people as an option. They'll think this video is not working, we're not going to show it to any more people. Secondly, give enough information in your title and your thumbnail, but leave it just a bit mysterious. One thing that I've found that works really well is to ask a question in the thumbnail or the title and answer it in the video. If I see a title that says, "Can avocados be used as personal flotation devices?" immediately my interest is piqued and I think, can they? And I'll probably click that video. And if that video actually answers the question in an entertaining way, we have literally the perfect scenario for the viewer to watch all the way through. If the video doesn't actually answer that question, that's what I would think of as the bad kind of clickbait. And for your thumbnail, you want it to catch people's eyes and you want it to give a bit of the vibe that we can expect in the video. People's faces do well in a thumbnail, bright colors do well, and showing emotions do well in thumbnails. That's why you see like what people call the YouTube face, where they're always like surprised or they're sad or they're angry or whatever it happens to be. Those kinds of emotions catch the eyes of people who might be scrolling. And again, there are a ton of resources that dive into the super specifics of making effective YouTube thumbnails. You guessed it, if you go searching on YouTube. So I'm not going to go any deeper than that. And like I mentioned, for me, I found that mystery is the key in the thumbnail as well. If you give them enough that they know what the video might be about, but don't give away the whole plot, that'll get them clicking. All right, so we have some idea of the direction. We've done a bit of research and we understand kind of the playing field, and we have an understanding of how we could potentially get some clicks. But what about the gear that you need for starting a YouTube channel or for making videos? Everyone always wants to know about the gear necessary to make great YouTube videos, and the best part is that you can basically be as much or as little as you want it to be, and you can still be successful on YouTube. That said, I have some guidelines that I'd like to suggest for people to keep in mind as you're going through this kind of process of choosing. When you're choosing gear, the most important thing, in my opinion, is that it should get out of the way. And what I mean by that is that it shouldn't be stopping you from making videos. So it needs to get out of the way of the process. It needs to be simple and effective enough while still deliver the quality that you're looking for. But the other side of that is it also needs to get out of the way for the audience. If the gear or having the wrong gear is a distraction for the audience, you're going to lose a lot of people that way. A quick example of this, let's say we've got a vlogger and they pick up a Sony a6100 and a 35mm f1.8 lens, which happens to be the lens that I'm doing this on right now. And let's say they go around and they're trying to do the kind of walking with the camera at an arm's length, classic vlogger style shot. Two things there. Neither the a6100 or the 35mm have stabilization. So that footage is going to be very shaky. And the other thing is that 35mm on that camera body is going to be way too tight of a shot for that type of video. We'll basically only be seeing a close-up of like this part of their face. So in that case, having the wrong gear, not bad gear by any means, but having the wrong gear will be distracting to the audience and be getting in their way of enjoying your video. So choosing the right gear for your specific project is tough though, because everyone obviously has a slightly different need, but there are a few categories that I think are important to consider when you're making these choices. Audio, video, stabilization, and lighting. These are kind of the four categories that I like to think about when I'm trying to help people through this process. For audio, generally, you want to try and get whatever microphone you have as close to the subject as possible. So if you've got your camera on the other side of the room, you might want to figure out how to plug in a microphone and get the microphone closer to the subject. Historically, the microphones that are built into your camera, the ones that are the little tiny holes on the top, aren't necessarily ideal other than for their convenience. However, with newer cameras like the Sony ZV-E10 and ZV-1, they're starting to change that a little bit by putting better microphones in the camera specifically for online content creators and vloggers, making it more convenient than having to plug in a separate camera. That being said, if you can, I still recommend getting a shotgun microphone that you can plug into the camera. Sony has a couple that work directly in the hot shoe mounts without having to plug in any cables, which is really nice. And then there are other companies like Rode or Deity that make these kind of typical on-camera shotgun mics that you see all over the internet. And those are really handy too. Alternatively, you can look into wireless lav setups where you can clip the microphone to a shirt and be further away from the camera if you need to be. That's kind of one of the advantages of having a lav mic, specifically a wireless lav. Let's say you're doing like a cooking show and you've got a shot of the whole kitchen. That means your camera is likely a ways away from you. And having that lav mic attached to you that moves around with you wherever you go in the kitchen probably makes sense rather than having a microphone across the room on top of the camera where it's picking up as much room noise as it is of you actually talking and telling the audience what you want to tell them. But most of the time, but if most of the time you're about a foot or two away from the camera, looking at the lens and moving with the camera, like this shot here, then a microphone either on top or built into your camera might just do the trick. So in deciding on audio, then kind of knowing what kind of video and what you're going to be doing might influence the choice that you make into the type of audio that you go for. For the video category, this is pretty easy because the image quality of cameras these days is pretty awesome and generally exceeds our needs based on the way that we view these videos in the end. We've got our phones that shoot video and can be a convenient option. So, no excuses not to start. We've got little action cameras that are great for certain situations, tight spaces, and obviously action sequences. We've got compact point and shoot cameras that fit in our pocket, but have some of the features of the bigger, fancier cameras and kind of the manual capabilities. And then we've got my personal favorite, the world of mirrorless cameras. Most of these options will shoot 4K video nowadays, which is, again, more than enough for most situations. And if you take the time to learn how to use them properly, you can make something really great with any of them. I started out, like I said, with the Sony a6000 from Sony's APS-C mirrorless camera lineup, and it was great. It was a great place to learn, and I thought that the quality looked pretty darn good. Now we have all the newer cameras in the a6000 lineup with better autofocus, flip screens, microphone inputs, and all sorts of stuff that make your life way easier and more convenient to be making videos. And now we're starting to see cameras that are specifically made for the online video creator, like I mentioned, the ZV-1 point and shoot and the ZV-E10 APS-C mirrorless camera. And then if you have a camera with the ability to change lenses, the possibilities are, pretty much endless, especially in the Sony E-mount ecosystem right now. There is so much to choose from. So doing a little bit of research into different focal lengths and options out there is going to be really helpful to find what really makes sense for your project. Again, lenses are the perfect example of everyone needing something a little bit different. So doing some research on for your specific project situation, the room that you're shooting in, and those kinds of things will go a long way for you. All of our options nowadays, like I mentioned, they produce great image quality. So if you learn to use them properly, is going to be the best kind of weapon that you have for this. You've got, and then you're just looking at the features that you might need to make your life easier. Great autofocus, stabilization if you need it, a flip screen so that you can see yourself, having the right focal length for your situation, and those kinds of things. I could pretty much talk about gear all day. Like I said, everyone's going to need something a little bit different. So if you can figure out what are the important factors for you and then find the features that match that in the gear that you're looking at, that's going to be the way to go. The next category that I mentioned was stabilization. And this one is pretty easy. Get a tripod. That's basically my bottom line. There are other things out there like gimbals and sliders and other stabilizers, but a tripod is going to be your best friend. When I first started out, I thought the walk and talk classic vlogging, holding the camera style was the end all be all of online video creation. But now I will take a locked off tripod shot 9 times out of 10 and be way happier with it. Your tripod doesn't need to be anything fancy necessarily. It just needs to be able to hold your camera steady. I'm a big fan of travel tripods because they're compact and light, and generally I carry 2 with me pretty much everywhere I go. Most people can probably get away with 1, but because I do content about cameras, I often have to film myself using a camera on another tripod. So I'm stuck with 2. And our final essential gear category is lighting. And this one is kind of complicated, but also really important. On one hand, we've got a giant light source floating in the sky for all of us, and everyone has access to it. On the other hand, it doesn't always play nice or stay still, and it likes to disappear half the time, if not more than half the time this time of year. So having some decent lights can be really helpful for consistency and control of your own lighting. And no matter how fancy your camera is and how great the sensor is, if you don't give it enough light, it's not going to look great. Regardless of what you decide to do as far as purchasing gear for your content, your greatest weapon, like I mentioned before, is going to be learning how to use it all properly. A great content creator will be able to do more with a cheap filming setup than an inexperienced one with $50,000 worth of gear. This has been proven time and time again on YouTube by people just making great content and knowing how to connect with their audience who maybe don't know how to use their camera as well as, half the other people. Like I mentioned, I could babble about gear all day, but before I get carried away, I will just remind you one more time to drop questions if you have them. And I'm going to get on to some quick tips and tricks for making online content here after I get a quick drink of water. I cannot state enough how important good audio is for your videos. People are much more likely to watch through a video with bad image quality and good audio than if it was the other way around. Like I said before, a good rule of thumb is to get the microphone as close to the source as you can. That will help with balancing out background noise as well as improve the quality of the audio coming from the source. Using the right mic for the job can help with this, but also using a wider lens allows you to get physically closer to the camera if you're using a microphone that's either built into the camera or attached to it on the top. If you're not sure about whether to use auto or manual settings, it's basically about what your comfort level is. If you feel like you have a good handle on things like white balance, properly exposing your image, and the camera's settings and options, then I would definitely suggest going for manual because it gives you more control and is more consistent. If you're in automatic modes, your camera might shift something on you in the middle of a shot, and that can be really annoying, especially when you get to the editing phase, especially with the white balance. And actually, in fact, if you keep everything else in auto modes, I would probably suggest learning about white balance and how to set it properly so that you can just have that at least in manual. On the flip side of the manual argument, using auto modes can make your life a lot easier and sometimes take the stress of making the video out of your hands. And again, gear should get out of the way. So if auto works better for you, I say just all the power to you. There's nothing wrong with using auto modes to make your videos. I know a lot of creators that do it and it works just fine for them. And most people on the other end of the, watching their videos have no idea what's going on. So just whatever works better for you. I'm personally a fully manual guy, but that's mostly just because I'm a bit of a control nut. The other advantage of auto modes is the speed. Shooting manual means making manual adjustments. So if you're shooting the kind of video where you're capturing things as they happen, being able to point the camera in the right direction and shoot without having to set anything up might mean the difference between getting the shot and not getting it. In regards to editing videos, the best thing that you can do is practice, practice, practice. This could be said about all of this, but I feel like it's especially important for editing. Be ruthless with what you cut. Humans have super short attention spans, and if there's something that's not important for the plot of your video and it doesn't keep the flow of the video going, cut it. Practicing your editing will also make you better as a shooter as well. You start to understand what will be useful and what won't be useful because as you're shooting, you're thinking about it, how it's going to work in the edit. They call that shooting for the edit. Another thing is to make sure that you're utilizing B-roll. If you don't know what that is, B-roll is basically any footage that isn't the main talking or dialogue shots. So you might be talking about how cool your ride-on lawnmower is, but in the middle of talking in that clip, with the audio still going, you might be showing some close-up shots of the details of your lawnmower. This keeps the visual attention of the viewer while they're still getting the information from hearing what you're talking about. B-roll can also be handy for establishing your scene, showing the area that your action is taking place, or it can be used as just like a bit of a breath between sections in a video so that it's not overstimulating. This is all the kind of stuff that you can be thinking about when you're doing your research and watching other people's videos and deciding what you like and what you don't like. In regards to color grading, which is one of the biggest questions I always get, if you're just starting out, I just honestly wouldn't worry about it too much. It can be a really cool way to make your videos appear higher budget and more stylized, but it's definitely not the most important aspect, and if it's done badly, it can kind of distract from the video itself. In general, learning some basic color grading so that you can make things look natural is pretty much all you need, especially, again, at the start. I'm obsessed with the process and the art of color grading, so I'm super hypocritical about this, but I definitely understand when I'm overdoing it, and I've decided that I'm okay with that at this point. And very lastly, focus on you, your personality, and play to your strengths. I'm a technical person for the most part, and then a creative person second, so I lean heavily on the technical side to make my content stand out. I'm also a bit goofy and I appreciate clever but cheesy humor, and so that makes it into my videos as well. It's authentic and it's real and it's full of personality and it's useful for people. It's really me shoved into a 10-minute video and uploaded to YouTube. So be you, be authentic, and play to your strengths and interests. And one tip that I always tell people when they're starting out is that you don't need to upload everything that you make. I encourage you to make practice videos before you upload. In music, you don't buy an instrument and then immediately book a concert to play for everyone. You practice for a while first until you feel like you're ready to show off what you've learned. Make a video or two, go through the process, learn what it's like and how to repeat it, and then when you feel like the content is ready, then share it. It's a fine line because you don't want to wait until you're making Hollywood blockbusters necessarily, but you also don't want to put out something that you'll regret later. So do some practice runs and then start sharing. Okay, I know that was a lot, and hopefully there was some information in there that will be helpful for you in your YouTube journey. And hopefully it sparked some questions that I can try to answer here in our question section. But just as a bit of an extra, I'll also say that my DMs are always open on Twitter and Instagram. And I try to answer as many comments as possible on YouTube too. So if we don't get to your question here, feel free to hit me up. It's just Dunna did it across the board, basically. You can find me anywhere there. And thanks for being here.
That's awesome, Dunna, man. That was one of the best talks I've ever heard you do, to be honest with you. And like I said, just from a personal note, even just putting up our own content sometimes or my own, just, behind the scenes stuff. And I'm always kind of curious to how to approach it, how to put it up. Should I put it up or not? But that brings me up to my first question, actually. I'm sure some of our attendees will relate. When it comes to your tags and your description when you're putting up a video, can you elaborate on how important that is? Because sometimes we'll put up generic tags and stuff like that on YouTube, but do you recommend actually specifying that a little bit more and kind of making it a little bit more of a niche, or do you kind of generalize it like an Instagram hashtag?
I think it's a bit of a combination. So you want to have some stuff that's a little bit more generic, and then you also want to have stuff that's a little bit more specific, and then you kind of hit a little bit of both. There's a great tool out there called Morning Fame, and it's what I use for a lot of my kind of tagging and descriptions and titles and that kind of stuff, to try and make sure that they kind of feed the search engine part of YouTube. It's this funny melding of like, it's human, so you have to do the stuff that I was talking about making it mysterious and like catching the attention, but it's also a search engine that is looking for certain key phrases and that kind of stuff. So using a tool like Morning Fame or TubeBuddy is another one that has lots of tools to help you with your tags and stuff like that. I found that the most effective. And the other side of that is that I think that tags can be effective, but I don't think that you should stress about them too much. Like I think people put a lot of weight on them, especially when they're first starting out. They think that that's going to be the thing that makes the big difference. But I think your content is way more important than that. I think if your content is really good, YouTube will show it to people, kind of thing.
So that was Morning Fame and TubeBuddy?
Yeah, so Morning Fame, and the Morning Fame is a bit weird because it's Morning Fa and then .me. And then
Okay.
TubeBuddy is just tubebuddy.com. It's like a browser extension that you can add in, and there are priced tiers and there are free versions and stuff. So definitely go check those out. If anyone catches one of my videos, they're always down in the descriptions too. There's links down there for you.
Awesome. And when it comes to things like actually putting content on YouTube, a lot of people may not have access to things like Premiere or DaVinci or some of these high-end Final Cut programs or anything like that. But YouTube does have a great sort of content creating section as well. Do you ever use that for any of your stuff or for audio even? Because I know a lot of the times it's hard to get a license for some of our videos. Do you ever use anything of the actual YouTube supplied content that you get your access to?
I think early on, I was definitely using some of those tools and stuff. YouTube has a copyright-free music license part of their website. I'm not 100% sure how to get to it. I think it's somewhere in your YouTube studio, and there are
Yeah.
like sound effects and stuff in there
Yeah.
that you can
Yeah.
use, which is really cool. They're a little bit on the like cheesy stock music side of things, but when you're first starting out and you're not making any money off of this necessarily, like, and maybe you're not going to be looking for your epidemic sound or your music bed, those kind of pricier
Right.
licenses to get the higher quality music and stuff. It's a great option to have those things, and they've even got like a video editor in there too. So if you need to make little cuts and stuff like that, I think you can do a bunch of that in YouTube as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. That's awesome. What is your run and gun go-to pocket cam, the one that's going to be with you anytime you go?
I'm super overboard and overkill. So like my main camera is my Sony FX3, which is the one that I'm shooting on now, which is like just like a super pro camera that is like I said, super overboard kind of thing. So not necessarily what I suggest to people that are starting out, but I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think my run and gun is the ZV-1 or the ZV-E10. If you guys haven't checked that out yet, it's a great camera to get started with.
So
YouTube.
fantastic.
Yeah,
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 great stuff, and lots of cool features that are made. Like I was saying in the talk there, like they've built those cameras specifically for online video content creation.
yeah,
It's awesome.
yeah. Hey, Donna, do you ever promote any of your YouTube content on Instagram and tie the two together? Because with Instagram, for example, you could do a lot of the stories, reels, and now Instagram video. Are you posting the same content off of YouTube onto Instagram to gain more following or more attention, or are you strictly leaving it two different platforms?
It's a tough one, and it has changed a little bit recently because Instagram is changing. So prior to, I don't know, a couple of months ago or whatever, Instagram was where I shared my photos and YouTube was where I shared my videos. And that was pretty much the extent of it. Generally, when I'd post a new video, I would also post some kind of a photo that was maybe related to the video and say, hey, I've got a new video up over on YouTube kind of thing, excuse me. But other than that, like I wasn't like, not necessarily taking bits and pieces of my video and putting them over on Instagram to try and get people over. I was using it primarily as just a photo platform. But more recently, as Instagram promotes Reels more and video in general more, there's definitely a push to start trying to make micro content from your macro content. So your longer form videos on YouTube, and then chunk it up into smaller pieces and maybe use some of that for Reels. The interesting part of that is trying to make sure that you're shooting it in a way where you can convert it to vertical. That's the part that I've found probably the most difficult
Right.
for that kind of conversion over there. But generally, I keep them reasonably separate, just photos on Instagram,
Okay.
videos on YouTube kind of thing.
Right. And with uploading your content to YouTube, do you have a certain time limit that you work with as far as how long your video should be? Because there's been talks in the past where people say like going over 10 minutes, let's just say, for example, you start to lose your audience's attention. Can
Mm.
you elaborate on that a little bit as to where the good ballpark figure is, you know?
Yeah, I like to try and get them between 10 and 15 minutes. For my content, that seems to work pretty well. But the goal in the end is basically make it as short as I can while still making sure that all of the important information is in there. So if I get to the end of my edit process and it's a 25-minute video and I watch it back through and say there's nothing in there that I can cut without feeling like it's going to be missing something, then it's a 25-minute video and it's going up on YouTube. And
Yeah.
that's something that, when I talked about practice, practice, practice in the editing process, that's something that took a long time to start to figure out, and start to kind of try and get inside the mind of your audience and what's fast enough and what's too fast, and where it's important to take a little break and those kinds of things. The whole 10-minute video thing, I think, originally started because that was the threshold for a certain kind of advertising or something along the lines. They've shortened it now.
Yeah.
It can be 8 minutes and you'll get the mid-roll ad. So that was people talking about, I think, monetization and trying to make more money. I honestly, I say ignore that if you can. Like, if I have a video and it only needs to be 5 minutes long, I don't ever in any way, shape, or form try and bump it out so that it's 8 minutes long to try and get the mid-roll ads. Just make the video the best video it can be and then upload it. That's basically my rule of thumb, and I don't worry about
Yeah.
the time too much.
Right. Okay. If anybody does have any questions, guys, feel free to engage in our conversation. We have some amazing advice here from Dunna today, and I definitely know it's gonna help me with my own YouTube channel, and hopefully I got some great pointers from you today. Just a couple of other things. People talk about the lens selections a lot when it comes to
Mhm.
YouTubers or, for example, vloggers. And they're kind of stuck in that 16 to 35 range. They want to have a little bit more of the environment showing or anything like that. Do you have a specific lens that you can recommend, or why you should choose one over the other?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one, especially like you said with the kind of vlogger world. The 16 to 35 is kind of king because they like to be able to show a lot of the environment. I started out with Sony APS-C, and all of the standard zooms for that start at either 16 or 18, which on APS-C is either 24 or 27, right? And so it's a little bit tighter, but I've got big, long arms, so I could kind of get away with it. And I got used to seeing a bit more of like a head and shoulders kind of shot instead of the whole environment. And more recently, I've started to find myself using my Sony 20 millimeter. So if you're full frame, that 20 millimeter to me, for whatever reason, seems to be kind of the happy medium between the super ultra wide thing that to my eye just looks a little bit kind of weird and distorted, and then 24 millimeters that might be a little bit too zoomed in if you're holding the camera at an arm's length and you don't necessarily have big long arms, or you're not holding it on the end of an extra tripod that can push it out a little further. That 20 millimeters has really been handy. And the funny part about that is that I finally, about a year ago, caved and bought the 16 to 35 G Master after years of wanting it and just being like, it's a little expensive. And I absolutely love it. And what I kept finding is that I would, at the end of a take, I would walk over to my camera, or I would pull my camera in, and I would see where I set the zoom to, and it was almost always at 20 millimeters. And that was really the thing that pushed me over the edge to get the 20 millimeter f1.8, which is a fantastic lens. But that's kind of where I like to live, is at around that kind of 20 millimeter range.
Okay.
And then obviously, like, I shouldn't say obviously, if you're shooting with like APS-C, you have to understand the crop factor and that kind of stuff. There's not a huge selection of ultra wide lenses for Sony APS-C. The 10 to 18 is kind of the classic, and it's got stabilization built in too, which is nice. For people who are shooting with, things like the A6300 or A6400 that don't have the stabilization. Even the ZVE10, which has the digital stabilization in it, but it doesn't have sensor stabilization. Something like the 10 to 18 can be really helpful just to take out those micro jitters if you're moving with the camera or going handheld.
Yeah, I think that's actually my go-to setup right now is the ZV-E10 with the 10 to 18.
Yeah.
I love how compact that system is. I love that it can fit in my bag, and you can actually get some really nice footage out of that camera. And it's just a great running gun camera, both for street photography and for vlogging itself.
Yeah,
And
100%.
especially with that onboard 3-capsule microphone there, it just sometimes it eliminates the need for getting an additional microphone as well.
Yeah, I agree. I hope that we see more of that. The microphones getting improved on the cameras, because I think even on the higher end stuff, it would be cool to see that, because there are certain situations where it would be nice just not to have to throw that on, or if you're flying it on a gimbal or something like that, it'd be nice to just have decent audio without that.
Now, going back to content real quick, just before we wrap this up. What about B-roll, man? I hear a lot of people talking about how important B-roll is, and it's really the B-roll that's making up the vlog or the YouTube content. What do you think? What's your take on the B-roll?
I mean, so B-roll has this. Oh man, this is a tough one. So this is all over YouTube. So people talk about cinematic B-roll, and what they're really talking about are these little sequences that people put together that are swoopy, or like they've got big epic music with it and stuff, and they're really visually stimulating, which is really awesome. But the definition of B-roll in that case is kind of being stretched, in my opinion, like to its limit. Because if you're showing what's happening, getting from point A to point B, let's say, go with the classic, like we're making a coffee, and you're going to show the process of making the coffee, that's not necessarily B-roll anymore. That is the main plot happening kind of thing. But that's, I think, what a lot of people are talking about when they're, talking about the cinematic B-roll. And really, it's a visually stimulating way to keep the viewer engaged. Now, I think the kind of more classic way to look at B-roll is like, for example, if I was talking about how cool my water bottle is, and then all of a sudden I showed some shots of my water bottle and all the cool stickers in it, but you can still hear my voice going on in the background, that might be considered B-roll. Obviously, it would have to actually be another shot of that instead of this same shot. But I think that's kind of the more typical thing. If you think of like a newscast, and you think about they're talking about some fire that happened on 52nd Street or whatever, and the newscaster is talking, and then they're showing slow panning shots of the stuff that happened there, that's B-roll. And that's just a way to keep your viewer engaged instead of them just doing this all the time, because this talking head thing can get pretty boring pretty quickly. But that being said, like either or, like regarding what the definition of it is and stuff is like I said, I think people are kind of stretching that, but it is really cool to see those kinds of sequences and see people flexing their filmmaking skills in something even as simple as a vlog that maybe doesn't necessarily need it, but it makes it enjoyable to watch. So you can definitely throw them in there, and hopefully your audience will be on board with that.
That sounds great, man. Dunna, I just want to quickly share your Instagram account real quick with everyone, just so everyone can get an idea as to where to find you. You have some amazing content on this page, man. I was kind of creeping it as we were talking, but absolutely fantastic, guys. For all of the people who are joining us today, you can find him on Instagram at Dunna Did It, and of course on youtube.com/Dunna Did It as well. If you have any questions, guys, we're here for a couple more minutes. Feel free to just ask away. We have some amazing advice here that we're going to put to use as well. But Dunna, I'd really like to thank you for sharing some of your advice and the insights on how to make YouTube work, and really appreciate you being at Profusion and just with Sony of Canada today as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's definitely an honor to be here, and I love sharing this kind of stuff and trying to help other people have the awesome experience that I've had along the way.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Just going to stick around for about a minute or so, guys. If you have any questions for Dunna, please feel free to engage in our Q&A. Otherwise, we're going to wrap it up just in a couple of minutes.
Sounds good. I need to get one of those hoodies, man. The B Alpha hoodie, that looks dope.
We'll figure something out. Not a problem. What lens did you have on the FX3 right now?
It's the 35mm 1.8.
180.
That's
Oh, yeah.
like that's my go-to for most of my kind of talking head in the
Right.
studio stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I find on full frame 35 is like it's a nice
Yeah.
look.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Awesome, Dunna. I think we're gonna wrap it up. I think we're good with the Q&A as well. Thanks again, Dunna. I really appreciate you being here, man. That was some great advice, and really looking forward to trying that out myself. So
Thanks so much, dude.
awesome. Has he tried any of the trio lenses? Have you tried any of the new 24 or 40 or 50?
24, 40, 50. I don't think so.
No.
The 50,
Okay.
the 51 too? Is
No.
that
No.
no?
25.
No, oh no, I didn't get the little teeny guys. No, I haven't got them yet.
Okay. Sounds good.
I
We'll
don't
get
I
them
don't
over
think
to you.
yeah, I've been going through there's so much new gear right now. It's crazy, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Yep. Any other questions? And I think we're okay. All right. Thank you
Sweet.
so much. I think we're gonna
Thanks for
wrap it
having
up.
me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
All right.